Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Men Human Rights Discord server. We are the semi official Discord server of the Men Human Rights subreddit. This is our Saturday chat, which we host every week to discuss about men's issues and the different things which face them, the reaction of society to men's issues, and sometimes we even critique some of the content created about men. So, today's topic, we are going to be going over the recent International Women's Day, that for those of you who don't know is on March 8th. And we're going to be reviewing more specifically certain posts that we have found from this year's Women's Day that were a bit controversial and harmful towards men. For example, we got this first post here, which talks about a class, and during the first lesson, the boys were told that they had to stand up the entire lesson. And the reasoning for this was honestly absolutely absurd. It was a nod to an incident in Turkey 2 years ago when President Erdogan did have a chair ready for Charles Michel, but not for Ursula von der Leyen. So she had to stand up, and I guess for some reason, international politics are allowed to be reverberated in the classrooms by forcing boys to stand up for a whole first period. And that was their supposed quote unquote way of celebrating international.
Yeah, you notice it's becoming International Men Are Slaves Day. Like this sort of thing really, like look at the expressions of the girls in the photo. Have we got the photo to show people?
Yeah.
Well, look at the expressions of the girls in the photos. They're so smug. They're being taught narcissism, and they're being taught it in spades, and they're being taught it directly by feminism. This is totally contrary to what equality is about, and this is actually reinforcing men's gender roles, because men's gender roles typically are to serve, provide, and protect women, and that's basically how things go out. The woman stays at home and is pregnant. The man goes out and hunts the food and gets all the food for the woman while she looks after the kids and all that sort of stuff. And that sort of thing has turned into men have to give women all their money in the courts and all that sort of stuff. And men are simply seen as ATMs. They're seen as servants, basically. And this is the absolute opposite of what any actual equality group would be fighting for, i.e. us. Like, we don't want to have National Men's Day, all the girls have to stand up in the classroom while the boys get to sit down. That's just atrocious.
National Men's Day. No one on International Men's Day sits here and goes off. Like, they don't do this on International Men's Day. They just don't.
Yeah. You notice it's every single year there's horror stories from International Women's Day. Like every year. We've got an article about it on the website. 8 sexist things you can do for International Women's Day. And some of them are incredibly sexist, like threats of violence and things like that based on gender. We actually have an example exactly like this for the International Women's Day article. It's I think it was the one where the boys were told to stand up and apologise for being male to the whole class. There's been a couple of instances of that, actually.
So I think the example of the classroom there, it's so obvious, like an attempt of virtue signal. because like the virtue here is like the idea that there's an injustice being rectified right there, because of some politician that like had to like stand up or whatever. So like yeah, it is a form of indoctrination, but it's a form of like reparations and virtue signaling too. That's what makes it so insidious. And Reaper, you wanted to say something, right? You can unmute yourself.
Okay, so I believe it's unfair, of course, for the men to be forced to stand up on Women's Day. Like, of course, it's absurd, and also imagine if we have International Men's Day and like the women are forced to stand up. Like, what will be the consequences? Right? Like, can you imagine that? Like, I don't know. It's just a very absurd thing to do. Like, as if like, okay, sure, like, but even then, like, what are the benefits of forcing boys to stand up on Women's Day? Even if you think about it in a utilitarian way, it doesn't benefit women in any way for the boys to stand up forcibly during International Women's Day. Like, it should be about empowering women, right, and celebrating women's achievements, not actually, you know, uh, be mean to men for no purpose at all. Like, it just doesn't make sense to me. I guess.
I mean, I think that's a natural extension of like what's been happening for a while now. I mean, you can pretty much see that with every quote unquote attempt that feminism makes to help men, like with men's liberation, for example. And they claim that like men's liberation, I think most of us here can agree it's an extension of feminism with how much they overlap. And like you'd see them saying that like oh, it's feminism helps men too, but in reality it's just a way for feminists to talk about their own issues through men in a way that does not offend their own sensibilities or a way that serves their own purposes. It's a natural extension of like the gender roles, quote unquote, that feminists claim to fight against, but in reality benefit from greatly, right? So it kind of ties back into the idea of like the National Organization of Men Against Sexism, right? That shit show that happened years back with Emma Watson. It's been a lot. It's been happening for a bit. It's the first time it has been personified in such a way. I would say.
Looking at this picture, and of course, we're all focusing on the expressions on the girls' faces, which is, entitled and condescending. But look at the faces on the boys, because they're kind of telling me, it's like, hey, you know what? This ain't over yet. Right? You've got this going on right now, but, we're still going to be around tomorrow, right? And we're not going to forget this. If at least the stated goal, I'm assuming, is that Erdogan, had committed an affront to Ursula von der Leyen by not giving her a place to sit, as if to say you're not really welcome here because you're a woman. Making these boys stand was a measure to, increase their sensitivity to the plight of Ursula von der Leyen. Not, everything in the picture tells me that not only did they fail at that, but they've created some enemies here, right? That may have never even given this a passing thought had they not been publicly humiliated this way. You know,
Right.
a lot of terrible things about humiliating, especially young boys. But one thing it does is it lengthens their memory and it stiffens their resolve. You know, I mean, I don't think these guys are going to forget this for the rest of their life. You know, and
Congratulations.
I'm guessing it's going to be a problem. You know.
Congratulations.
I'd be surprised if those girls weren't bullying the boys after and before class because of this thing that they like. We've been designated that they have to do.
Yeah, it's basically
Maybe.
congratulations, guys. Or whoever was behind this, you've just created at best MGTOWs, at worst angry incels. Bravo.
Yeah.
Now what are you gonna do?
Right. You know, and if the real goal is to you know, further the beautiful trouble philosophy of you know, it's an accelerationist strategy to just keep making things as divisive and polarizing and resentful as possible. You know, I would say this kind of thing helps that happen, right? But it doesn't by any means, you know, strengthen the idea that that kind of tactic has a good outcome. You know, in other words, you know, yeah, that kind of you know, continuously divisive and polarizing strategy will change things. But I always have to say, you know, do you honestly believe it'll change things for the better? Because I don't think it will. You know, I really don't. I mean, one thing about, you know, very large groups of especially young men, you know, that are dehumanized and devalued and othered and kept out is they tend to organize, you know, and they don't do it to start knitting circles, right? They do it specifically to enact violence. That's what they do, you know. They're not as likely to do it as individuals, but yeah, in, you know, large, like I say, you know, unattended groups left to their own devices, you know, they figure out ways to burn down the village just to feel its warmth. And that's not, you know, that's not a trait that's assignable to any, you know, any one man or any one type of man. It is how men are, you know, and it accounts for some of the worst times in human history. But it is what happens. And, you know, if this really is their plan, I predict that it will fail. And it will fail at the cost of everyone.
Honestly, I think rather than like society dying in flames, like the thing that you said, like you know, like the child that is not embraced by the village will burn the village down to feel its warmth, right? That's what you mean, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a reference to that proverb, yeah.
Yeah. Like, I think what will happen is like, more like, rather than and taking the time and energy to do that, it's more like a slow and gradual death by men not participating in society rather than a violent protest. I think it's more like a breaking down of society's essential components that are being done by men currently, and I think I think it does not need to happen with violent protests. I think.
I don't. I
I
hope
don't.
that, but I don't know that. And the reason I say that is because I agree that for a lot of ordinary men and boys, it will be kind of a slow death or a slow lack of flourishing. And I think we're already seeing that. But what I don't think is being addressed here is that not all men and boys are willing to put up with that. In other
Well,
words, some of the very most impulsive and prone to violence and risk-taking and irrational men are going to be all that's left.
It's an interesting scenario.
I mean, this is very common in prison. This is very common in prison culture. The hierarchies in prison culture are not quite the same as they are in the wider world. Okay, they're they're driven by and maintained by essentially survival of the well, you wouldn't say fittest, but survival of the fittest within those characteristics. Most risk-taking, most impulsive, least forgiving, most psychopathic, most power-driven of anybody in that system. And like I say, that ex-cons very often find it very difficult to transition into regular society because regular society for a long time hasn't worked that way. It does not mean we're incapable of going back to that.
Interesting.
Well, I do agree with the general sympathy of the idea, Taz. I just don't agree with the way it's presented. It's like, oh, let's help men or else they'll burn down the village. It's kind of like, it's not really a good look because more often than not, men just, they just kill themselves. The idea is like, help us or we're going to be a threat to your existence or your livelihood. It's not really something I like being represented from men's issues because, it's kind of, how do I say it, right? It's a threat more than a cry for help, right? You're threatening people. You're telling them, oh well, if you don't help men, well, men are just gonna burn down the proverbial village. I don't believe that's a good thing, right? That that we're presenting men as liable to throw
It's not a threat. It's a prophecy.
Yeah, it's inevitable. It's not something for certainly a group like us to enact. Okay, we have no power to do such a thing. And so it's not a threat, it's a consequence. If I try to talk you out of jumping off a bridge, okay, and if I tell you jumping off the bridge is likely going to kill you, does that mean I killed you?
I'm gonna play devil's advocate for a second. I'm gonna be your average feminist, right? How does that help our cause? Well, if I'm a feminist, I'm instantly gonna assume that you're still proving that men are just violent assholes who will throw a tantrum if they don't get what they need or like what they deserve. It's kind of that way. That's how they would react to it, right? Now, obviously, they lack the nuance to acknowledge it like we do, but that's how they're gonna react to it. I mean, they already say that, right? They already treat the male gene as a flaw, as something ungodly, something that should not have existed, right? What I do agree with your general sympathies. Don't get me wrong. I feel like this message could be misrepresented. It's essentially giving them ammunition.
And I suppose that it will be, but my only response is going to be currently, while there's a few of us men left that don't want to see that happen, let's act now. Because once we're gone, all you're going to have left is those men that you really are, that you have a good reason to be afraid of. Wait, the point is that we won't be there. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe yes. I do see your point, but I feel like more often than not, men will just kill themselves. They won't do anything violent.
Yes,
That's
that is absolutely right. More often than not, men will, like suicide or somehow or another sacrifice themselves. That is the
Yeah.
vast majority of men. Okay. Those that are left would rather see the village burn than kill themselves.
Yeah.
Okay. But that's a tiny
okay.
and the whole point is, the whole
I
point is
misunderstood. I thought
that-
we were the ones burning
it's
that
okay.
village.
No. The whole point of the matter is the vast majority of men are not the kind that would burn the village. Okay. And certainly the ideal is not to create any more of them, but they do exist. Okay. And, any woman, feminist or no, has every good reason to be, if not frightened, at least anxious around such a man. It's just that they've decided that we are all like that. And, if the rest of us that are not like that go away one way or another, okay, all that's going to be left are the kind of men that never cared anyway. Okay? And I know these men. Okay, I have been in company with these men, and they frighten me every bit as much as they frighten a woman, because they're capable of anything.
Yeah.
They are. There are not very many of them, but they exist. And once they're all that's left, it'll be too late to fix it.
Well, I kind of misunderstood what you're saying. I thought I was saying, oh, these men are gonna burn down the village. My protest was that they're not gonna burn down the village or go in a glorious blaze of flame. They're just gonna let the village burn because they're pulling out of maintaining the village. Am I getting that correctly?
Yeah, basically,
Yeah.
The original proposed discussion for today would have centered around my kind of solution to that problem. We'll have to save that for another day, but it represents a proposed solution to a current problem. Okay? In other words, what we have now is a problem. What we don't have is very much backing to what I would call a viable solution.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm pretty radical when it comes to the importance of things like forgiveness and love and compassion and forbearance and understanding. And patience, because I'm of the opinion that after all these thousands of years of human life, we've burned up all of our lesser options. It's either going to be these, really difficult and really hard-won virtues or savagery. And we've burned up everything in between. It's unfortunate, but that's what we did.
Yeah. I mean, generally speaking, right?
I think about the third option, which is just dumbness.
Is what?
Dumbness, not exactly savagery, but just, I don't know, just sort of. I don't know.
Yeah.
It
I mean,
would be savagery, like,
for a time. Well, for a time there would be, ignorance, dumbness, ignominy, right? And that kind of stuff. It's not supportable. It's not sustainable. It leaves a vacuum, and that kind of vacuum is always filled by the worst kinds of people. So you're right. I mean, there will be ignorance, and there will be numbness. But the worst among us are very happy to see that happen, because they jump right in the middle of it and say, "Follow me."
Yeah.
I said, this is the kind of thing that, gets us to the times in history that we keep saying we never want to go back to. But, that it takes work. I mean, you can't just say, I don't want to do that. It's like, I can say I don't want to do that because I don't. But at the same time, I understand that avoiding it and preventing it takes work, and the longer that the social order and the culture ignores it, the more work it's going to take.
Well, yeah. Usually what I've seen is the discourse about men's issues, right? It's starting to happen slowly but surely, right? But still, my worry about it is that feminists still have a monopoly on it, right? Right. What I've noticed is that they want men to be vulnerable. They want men to show vulnerability. Yeah, they want men to show vulnerability up until the point it's vulnerability towards something that violates their own worldview or tarnishes their own opinions. Right. You always for instance, and that's the huge example that I've seen. Right, and I know I'll talk about it, but men's lib again. My biggest issue with men's lib is that they're simply, if you look at how they talk about things, they're simply a reductionist. All of it is a reductionist group. It's purposefully reductionist. What I mean by that, right? They never talk about male victimization or sexual assault, right? They never talk about domestic violence, and they represent it as a gendered issue. Not only that, they blame it on toxic masculinity, right? So, as an extension, and then they say, oh, these are all men's issues, but how is women's own victimization a male issue when male's own victimization is not a women's? And then you start to see it's just like the same, traditional gender stereotype that they claim to fight against. It's yet again, it's men in the service of women, but you got this postmodernist ideas of, oh yeah, just fight against traditional gender roles. Well, in reality, they don't give a shit about traditional gender roles. Or stereotypes. They're willing to acknowledge it whenever it fits their own agenda, right? Men hitting women, right? That's not a traditional gender stereotype. That's not a stereotype, right? But they're willing to defend it. Women raping men, right? That's not a traditional gender stereotype. They're willing to defend it, right? So, also part of the reason, right? It's reductionist, as I said, purposefully reductionist. It's made to divert men's issues from a place that can actually help them or address anything significant on a systemic issue, on a systemic level, to an area that is quite literally just stupid. Just cry, wear makeup. Here, your problems are solved as a man. That's essentially how the discourse around men's issues is. But yeah, sorry for the tangent.
No, I mean, it's good that you say that, and it's good for people to hear it a little more publicly. But at the same time, those that know me know that I spend quite a lot of time among these people that you're talking about. And what I'm getting at is, not all of them, and the ones that are not like that, the ones that treat me properly, for lack of a better term, they are becoming more and more tired every day of the kind of people that that actually do the kind of things you're talking about, that actually behave that way, that actually enact that double standard, and they're beginning to act on it. The one thing that they really lack is kind of the ability to organize around it. And I, in fairness to them, I get that. We struggle with, our own organizational issues. But the fact of the matter is that, the tide is very slowly turning. That's where that kind of, consequentialist proposal comes in very handy, because these same people trust me and care about me quite a lot. And so I can discuss with them the consequences of things like this classroom fiasco, or the absolute catastrophe of male suicide, and the domestic abuse and sexual abuse of men by women. And
They never, they never talk
they
about
have
it.
yeah, well, no, I talk about it with them, and at that point, because of their relationship to me, they have no choice but to listen, and they have no choice but to agree, right? Because their own position with me and with each other is at stake. And
Yeah.
if they can't be put in that situation, right, then of course they're going to want their cake and eat it too.
Yeah.
Men in general, don't do anything, to correct that. I'm gonna, put as much of this on other men as I am women, for sure. Because there is much more that we could do.
It's okay.
Yeah.
I want to real quick show this video from a post we have that I feel like
Yep.
describes that quite perfectly. A video of a girl getting interviewed on International Women's Day. Share my screen. I hope this works. Please use this work. Did you hear that? Guys?
Yo. Hold on. Let me. Yeah.
I don't-
I see.
Could you hear it though?
No.
Okay. Let me see if I can solve it. Oh, Discord. Discord, you lovely application. Why do you do this?
And Taz, as I was saying, right, as you were saying, what I found most about like the feminist framework for men's issues is it's more insidious than anything. Like when you actually take the time out of your day to look into men's issues, like actual men's issues, not the same reductionist ones like toxic masculinity, which is an issue most men don't even, which a word most men don't even like, right? You'd find that it's purposefully reductionist, right? Oh, you're not gonna talk about male victims of domestic violence, the ones that you clouded studies about for 40 years. Oh, you're not gonna talk about that. You're not gonna talk about how men are not added in systemically are discriminated against when it comes to like sexual assault or getting recognized in the laws. Oh, they're not gonna talk about it. It's almost like these serious issues they wanted to be reserved for women, right? And these serious issues, like we're just gonna like sort of extend our generosity to some stupid abstract issues like toxic masculinity or the patriarchy hurts men. It's I find that quite insidious, me personally, right? Because these are not issues that men are that are bothering men that much as say alcohol. Oh,
Mhm.
Sorry.
They
Yeah.
absolutely are trying to monopolize them because it gives them power. If there are men's issues, then suddenly the whole thing becomes a lot more unsteady, and they can't go to such an extreme, and they can't, like, they've got to acknowledge men in everything, and they don't want to do that because they want everything for themselves, and so they narrow it down to women only.
Yeah.
yeah. It works. I can hear it, Dark Asia.
Okay. Finally. So I will play this real quick.
Oh, you want to play the video? I haven't set it up. Hold on, you'll have to let me just click on the thing. I keep talking.
Sorry, yeah. Contour is making. Why is my mind not working? Oh yeah. Saying that they were raised this way. It's just so feminism's been around since before even the 1800s, to be frankly honest. And so it's like we've had now generations and generations of people who've lived under this never ending thing called feminism that's morphing. And so because of that, you know, for a long time now, many women haven't had to live with, I guess, the responsibilities per se that they had to before. They they haven't had to, in a sense, like, have to. They've been taught something, and it's something that was taught to them. It was taught to their mother. It was taught to their grandmother. The like this little girl in the video, and also even with my age, which is like college age, you know, they're part of a generation that has not lived their life with a generation that lived, I guess, with the more of the different attitude, being very present in their life. And yeah, you got this set up. So I'll now show you all this nice little video.
Listen to women. Do what they say. I'll get you. When a woman says, wash the laundry, you do it. You gotta do what the girl says. When a woman says, buy a house, buy a house. When a woman says, buy a stroller, buy a stroller.
I think the world needs to listen to women more.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you on that.
I get that it's supposed to be lighthearted, but like it's kind of goes in tandem with happy wife, happy life. You know, you're supposed to be always on edge to satisfy your wife, or else something will happen, or like, you know, she's just gonna raise hell. You know, I understand it's a joke and it's meant to be like lighthearted and shit, but you know, it's kind of indicative of a more sinister thing. Like, not to read too much into it.
Fair point.
Well, I still say, you know, conversations and even connections and even support for the kind of women in general and even feminists in particular that don't buy into that, and at the same time, you know, presenting and you know, proposing that there will be consequences, you know, to this little girl's kind of thinking, you know, and that young man's kind of thinking. You know, I always use myself as an example of the kind of consequences I'm talking about. You know, I always say to these same people, think of tens of millions of men like me, you know, who are basically, you know, taking your demands to give you what you want and ramming them down your throat. You know, I say we can do that, right? You know, we can make that happen for you if that's what you really want. But you have to understand what you're really asking for. And for the rest of them, you know, and I'm just like there are just a small few men that are as dangerous and problematic as these people say we are. You know, the number of women like that are getting smaller every day. You know, in spite of the public pressure to act like this little girl. You know, they're revolting against it. They don't want it, and they're not going to have it. Okay, my take on it is back those women. You know, exclusively, right? You know, say that whatever I do as a man, whatever I do as a person, you know, it's going to be in concert with them, and it's going to be in support of them, and it's going to be to the exclusion of the others. You know, to just make it clear that they are not wanted, okay, and that they're not needed, right? And they can change their ways anytime they want to, but, you know, no quarter and no pity if they don't. They're going to get what they get. You know, and it won't be our fault. It will just be the way things happen.
Yeah.
It will be consequence. It will not be punishment. It will be what happens. All by itself.
This little girl's going to be very, very lonely when she grows up if she internalizes this.
No, loneliness sucks, man. You know, I can vouch for that. There are times when I'm profoundly lonely. You know, but
That, or even worse, she'll end up turning into a manipulative person that basically feeds
Oh,
on,
probably.
you know, very
could be.
hurt men.
Yep. And it'll be on us to make sure that, you know, she doesn't enact that manipulation on, you know, any man. That'll be our job. And that's fine. You know, that's a good responsibility to have. You know, protecting men is never a bad idea. And if the results are that she ends up alone with her cats, again, you know, it won't be from anything I or any one of us ever did. It'll just be what happens.
I'll tell you what, it'd be even worse than that. She's going to end up with the kind of man that she really does not want to get involved with. And that's the kind that will burn the village down.
Also possible.
More than likely.
Yeah. You know, very little we can do about that except to say that, you know, such men exist. And she either believes us or not. You know, but, you know, people are very difficult to fix, right? You know, and very difficult to have change in any substantive way, right? But the best thing about real consequences.
You show a person a new way, and you hope that they, you know, see the light.
Yeah.
It's sort of like a plate. When you crack it, it's doomed forever. But what you can do is you can recycle it. You can, you know, do the cool little thing they've started doing now with like the gold.
With gold inlay. Yeah. Yeah. You know, I mean, you can do that. You know, but like I said, you know, the one thing about a real consequence to one's own actions, you know, that isn't artificially put in place by someone else is, you know, when they realize they had no one to blame but themselves, it's a great motivation to really change. You know, that's how it worked for me. And, you know, it was a very permanent change. I'm nothing like how I used to be, you know, in word and deed and attitude. But sometimes that's what it takes, you know. And it's unfortunate, but maybe if she, you know, if that little girl watches this video, you know, who knows? Maybe she's really young. Maybe she's young enough that she'd be like, okay, maybe I don't want to, you know, to be a bully, right? Maybe that is a bad idea, and maybe it will leave me in the company of the worst people in my community. This is, you know, essentially that's, like I said, that's like prison. You know, your best bet in prison is to, you know, get yourself associated with the kind of people that belong in prison. You know, and if you're a free person, you know, that hasn't been convicted of a crime, you don't want to live that way. Right? You just don't.
True. Ugh. This generation's really just got a lot to figure out. It's so bad.
I mean, one other thing I see, right, is when it's usually it's still within like the sense of the quote unquote, you know, traditional gender stereotypes that feminists try to fight against, like the idea that men need to be protectors and providers or whatever, or like the provider part for this example. They claim to fight against that. However, you know, what they don't. That's just lip service. That's also been my issue, right? You're saying shit, but you're doing the opposite, right? Like the National Organization of Women, you know, fighting on multiple occasions against child support reform bills and alimony reform bills. right? That's not, you're not fighting against the gender stereotype. You're upholding it, right? You want men to speak their mind and speak their issues, yet, but when they do, when Warren Farrell tries to talk about male suicide in Toronto, he gets canceled for it. When they try to hold an International Men's Day in the University of York, guess what? We fucking canceled that as well because it's an event that upholds the patriarchy. It's like you got all these contradicting statements and all this lip service, and you got no action. And you claim to help men, which is the most insidious part, which bothers me a lot about it. It's you still benefit from men's traditional gender stereotypes. You still benefit from the selfless nature of having to provide and protect. Yet you claim to fight against that. Yeah, you claim to fight against emotional suppression, but you don't want to hear men talk about issues that you don't approve of, or like issues that you don't want them to talk about. You want them to talk about your own issues, but you want them to disguise it as their own issues, right? In a sense, right? Because if you see the word about toxic masculinity, for example, it doesn't say it hurts men. It says it hurts men too. It's like we're extending the hands of generosity to include men. It's like it's something really smug about it.
Yeah, it's I mean, and this is where we got the idea of calling this like the International Women's Day like chat plus women's narcissism, because it's just, it's this whole generation's sort of like grown up very narcissistic. It's all about how can we help women? How can women help themselves? Like there's when you hear about men's issues being addressed finally, it's almost always because, oh well, it's affected women this way. Which really sucks. But to answer Reaper real quick, silver lining. Obviously it's not all completely hopeless in the world. But if I had to give just a personal silver lining, I will say I was I guess shocked in a sense where I'm part of this RSO at my university. We had elections. I remember we were going through the interview process and was sitting there, and it was me and 3 other girls in my RSO. We're all close friends. We're all sitting together. We're all doing the interviews for board positions. And one of them, I wasn't even the person who said it of all surprises, even though I was thinking the same thing. It was the girl next to me who aired the concern. She said, "Do you notice how few men are trying out for the board?" I mean, don't you think it's concerning that guys are a little like leaning away towards trying to do to try and take a leadership position?
I
And that
mean,
was sort of a surprise to hear. And they're not the first people. There's some others that are starting to acknowledge it too, like how they don't see guys show up and like some of the mental health clubs and stuff. And so it's starting to be recognized, and 1 or 2 people are starting to notice it. And I think, again, this is just my campus maybe, but I've seen like a lot of guys on my campus who know about the men's rights movement teams or have at least watched like the Red Pill. And so it seems like people are starting to educate themselves a little more.
yeah. It doesn't help that a lot of what I've seen about it is that it being seen as like a male leader is kind of seen as cocky or entitled, or quote unquote male entitlement. Women being leaders, which they should be leaders if they want to, and if they have the grit to become leaders, to each to their own ability, right? But like you got like a male leader, or like a decent male leader, is somewhat seen as something that is not good. He's there as a result of entitlement, something that he easily gets. But a female leader is like this, absolutely amazing, empowered individual, right? We're not encouraging boys to become leaders. We're as much as we're encouraging girls to become leaders, right? As part of empowerment or something. Which is, hey, all the power to girls if they want to become leaders, but you're not singing the same tune for boys.
Fair point. But I think that's the thing is people are starting to ask, hey, why is it that boys don't want to become leaders? Great, now we're starting to see female leaders, and supposedly it's quote unquote equaling out, but I mean it is. But
Okay.
I mean, depends because
why aren't guys leading? And people are starting to realize that they're like, oh, why is it they don't seem to take as much initiative, let's say, as they did in the past? Because some
And like
people
I
would
say,
look at the
there's
50s and saying, so the husband would take initiative, get job, become manager, work hard to that managerial position. Now today it's like guys don't even want to like try for the board of their after school club.
right, but there are two very good things about that. And Stratch, I know that your impatience with that double standard is understandable. But the two very good things about that withdrawal by men, from desire for leadership is one, it demonstrates to the people who've been demanding it that it can be done, right? And that it is not a necessity, and it's not, like genetically encoded in us to always strive to be leaders. That, it's something we do in service to the people in our community. And the other good thing is to be able to point to it and say, there is a reason this makes you a little uncomfortable. And the reason it makes you so uncomfortable is because if this continues, the only people left who will be willing to be leaders are women. And what that means is, whatever the problem is, it's all your fault. Okay? You never fail to stress that. Okay? That if they have what they want, after that's over with, whatever is going wrong is going to be their problem and their problem alone.
yeah,
And you can say, and you can tell them, this is not a threat. This is a promise. This is something that will happen on its own. So reconsider what you're asking for or what you're demanding. Because if it continues, right, then you'll have millions and millions of young men who are unwilling to do anything. If that's what you want, well, okay, but it doesn't sound like an optimal outcome to me.
yeah. Well, one other thing as well that I want to add on to this, right, is that there has been a minimization of men's role in society, right? Like, men, what are they useful for? Nothing. It's like, ignore all the roads and all the other shit that men do on the daily that we take for granted. But it's not. It's more than that. There is something. I feel like there is a more important aspect to this as well. Is that you always say men have all, like, they always go with the apex fallacy. I'm pretty sure everyone's familiar with it, right? The apex fallacy. Men have all the seats in power, but what do you mean, men? It's not all men. It's not most men. It's just a small percentage of men, right? And then that automatically equals out to male privilege. That we have a lot of because we have a lot of people with fucking dick and balls in power. That makes that we're represented in social issues. Well, quite frankly, we're not, right? So maybe that's my view of it on it. But like, what does me being in power, or what does me as a man being in leadership benefit me directly? I'm still like, I'm not representing my fellow man in social issues. If I'm being in power, I'm just like probably just gonna start a program for women's domestic violence victims, or I'm gonna start a program specifically to look at women's issues. I'm not You know, it's like, and most men are aware of that. So if I'm in power, what does that entail? I'm just in power. I'm not benefiting anyone of my similar demographic as mine, right? I'm working in the service of other people who already have countless other support services and countless other representatives. It's what, you know, the patriotism is gone, right? Patriotism, you know, it's not there anymore. Most armed forces, you know, they're not meeting their quotas, right? Um, the national pride not there anymore, right? So what purpose is it to be in leadership? There is, I can acknowledge that it's multifactorial. There's maybe like, you know, um uh multifactorial in the sense that, you know, maybe it's men not seeing value in being leaders, maybe it's men being disrespected in society, but I feel like all of them crisscross with each other. That's me personally.
Well, I think with that, because I'd really like to end on a point, because I think that's really good to think about, that we could connect to the next chat. So we'll be wrapping this up, folks. This has been the Men Human Rights Discord server, the semi-official Discord server, the Men Human Rights subreddit. This is our Saturday chat, which we do every week at 1:30 p.m. Central, which is 7:30 p.m. UK. We always love hearing what you have to say. If you ever have a topic recommendation, feel free to go out, message MPainter, Mal, Men Are Human, or myself. We're always willing to listen. We'd love to get it on here. But until then, ta-ta. We will see you all next week.